There's no such thing as a disability leave, okay? But that's what we deal with probably more than anything in my whole practice, is what happens when somebody brings a doctor's note. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And it really is, it's simply a puzzle. It's a process of sort of working through your progression piece by piece to figuring out what you're dealing with and what are the rights of the employees and what are the obligations of the employer. There is absolutely no way you memorize all this stuff. I still rely on reference guides and look things up, but I do have a process. And I'm going to basically show you exactly what I do when you call and say, we got a doctor's note. Okay? And please, throughout it, just raise your hand if you have any questions. We do have people online, so I'll probably repeat the question because I'm not sure that they can hear it. Okay, I'm going to talk about medical leaves. There are probably 29 or 30 leaves I could rattle off the top of my head of reasons for people to be gone, for employees to be gone. We're going to focus today on the medical leaves or anything that's related to that. There are provisions in the labor code, the government code. There are federal laws and regulations that overlap. We've got your own policies, personnel policies and handbook, employment contracts, practices. One of the things you have to remember is that the laws, the policies, practices, case law, they don't work together. You have to comply with all of them. Sometimes they conflict, they contradict each other, they've got different provisions, they have similar provisions. Unfortunately, you can't just pick one and follow it down the path. You have to comply with all of them. This is just some of the places that they come from. The most common medical leaves, the Family Medical Leave Act. It's a federal statute, and it's enforced by the Federal Department of Labor. You've got the California Family Rights Act, very similar. It's got some quirky differences that we'll point out. It's enforced by the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Pregnancy disability leave. Notice I didn't say maternity leave. There's nothing in California law that requires maternity leave. If you have it, you've created it. But there's a Pregnancy Disability Act. It is also enforced by the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. And then workers' compensation, which pops in all the time. And one thing to remember, I said these things run together. Employees who are out due to a work-related injury can still be protected by the non-workers' comp statutes, the Fair Employment and Housing Act, the FMLA. The Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Employment and Housing Act talk about accommodating employees who have medical problems, which could include a leave of absence, and we'll talk about that. And then what I call the pseudo leaves. These are the ones that people think are leaves but aren't necessarily. Someone who is given a note from their doctor that qualifies them for state disability benefits. Okay, that's a benefit. It's a doctor gives a note, employee gets paid. It's not a leave, but it sounds like one. And then the Paid Family Leave Act. A little surprising, but Paid Family Leave Act is not a leave of absence. It is simply a income replacement provision through the Employment Development Department. But it gets confusing because it talks about 6 weeks of Paid Family Leave Act, and it's simply a benefit. And we'll talk about that too. So I get a call and someone says, our employee just brought in a doctor's note. Okay, here are the questions that I need to know to help you figure out the answer to your puzzle. What did the employee say was the reason for the leave or the need for a leave? Okay, now they're not always right, but at least it gives you an idea of which arena we're talking about. If the employee says, I need to be gone for 4 months because I'm going to travel across the United States on my Harley, okay, good. We need to know that because then we have to deal with it from that perspective. If the employee says, I need to travel across the United States to go to the Mayo Clinic, okay, now we're thinking maybe there's something else going on here. So what has the employee said is the reason? Oftentimes, the employee just walks in and says, here's a note from my doctor putting me off work. That's all we get. Okay? You will never, because it never happened to me, and I deal with lots of employees, you will never have an employee come up and say, I would like to utilize my rights under the Federal Family Medical Leave Act for 12 weeks of personal leave for my own serious health condition as defined by statute and confirmed by my medical certification. That just doesn't happen. They just say, here's a note, or they don't show up. You say, where are you? A doctor's note, and it gets faxed to you. You take it off the thing, that's the first you've heard of it. That's usually what we start with. So I ask, what is the reason the employee has given? Is it work-related? Okay? Now that seems like a simple question. It isn't always. Employee says, I went to urgent care this weekend for my ankle and the doctor has put me off work for a week. Is that work-related? I don't know. I don't know why they went to urgent care this weekend. I don't know if something happened on Friday and it didn't manifest itself till Saturday and they went to urgent care on Sunday. But I need to know that. Now I don't always want to say, oh, is it work-related? But I want to say, oh my goodness, what happened? Are you okay? Were you in an accident? Because I want to pin down what occurred. Because what happens a lot, more often than you would expect, that scenario happens. Employee tells their friend, oh man, we went snowboarding this weekend. After urgent care, they go to their regular doctor. Doctor says, you need surgery. Employee says, oh my gosh, I don't have health insurance. And then employee says, oh, when I was washing the truck at the end of the day, I tripped on a grease spot and twisted my ankle. Well, why didn't you report it? Well, you know, it was all right, and then it swelled up on Saturday, and then I went to the doctor, and they told me I need surgery. Now it's work-related. Okay, that happens. Now, sometimes it really did happen that way. Sometimes it didn't. And so I want to eliminate the possibility that it's work-related or confirm that it's work-related, because then I have other obligations as an employer. If, in fact, there might be a legal right to some leave or something, I want to know, is the employer covered? What I mean by that is same situation we just had over the weekend with the employee. Is this my employee? Is it a temp employee through somebody else? Is it someone that I'm treating as an independent contractor? So first question is, do I care that this person has a note from their doctor putting them off work? What's the relationship? And then you start going through your leaves in your head. You realize you've got a medical issue and you know there's a family medical leave and all this stuff. You got to figure out, am I covered? Family Medical Leave Act, California Family Rights Act, 50 or more employees. If you don't have 50 or more employees, it doesn't cover you. Okay, so we can take that one off the table. It's a process of elimination. Okay, it's not work-related. An employee told me they were snowboarding this weekend, twisted their ankle. Okay, we can take that out. So now we're sort of honing in on what's left. Is the employee covered? You can have a company that has 100 employees, so it's a covered employer under the Family Medical Leave Act, but you don't have any eligible employees. Because to be eligible, you have to work at a location that has 50 employees within 75 miles. AM, PM, classic example. Probably got thousands of employees. But I'm not sure they got 70 or 50 of them within 75 miles. You got 2, 3, 4 per store, and they're spread out over the place. So you're a covered employer, but no eligible employees. And an employee will come up to you and say, oh, we've got 50 employees, I'm entitled to this leave. And you look at it and you say, oh yeah, okay. And then you don't analyze whether or not the employee is covered. So you have to go through and say, are we covered? Is the employee eligible? What does your handbook say? If you go back to your office and look and there's a handbook that I didn't do and it has a personal leave in it, take it out because it's not required. There are lots of reasons why employees can be gone. We don't need to create more. If you've got a policy that says personal leave of absence for 30 days for whatever you want, guess what? They're now covered by it because you created it. What has been your practice in the past? You know, I told you a minute ago, there's no such thing as maternity leave. There's pregnancy disability. But as a company, if you have had a long-standing policy or informal policy of granting maternity leave, well, now maybe contractually you're obligated to a maternity leave policy, and we need to look at that. Okay. Did I go too far? Boy, I went really far. I'm sorry. Okay, we're good. Okay. Is the employee entitled to protected leave? Here's what's funny to me. We always talk about leaves and, you know, can they be gone? Can they be gone? Anyone can be gone anytime they want to. They just not show up. The question is, do we have to bring them back? And so, to me, all these leave statutes are a can I come back statute. And that's what we're really talking about. So as an employer, they're gone. I mean, if they're out and they have a doctor telling them not to come to work, they're not to come to work. Question is, well, what do I have to do and when if they decide that they want to come back? Do I have to hold their position? Do I have to pay them? Do I have to continue their medical benefits? Do I have to report anything to anybody? What can I ask them? What can't I ask them? Can I treat it as a disciplinary issue for absences? Those are the things that we worry about, not whether or not that they can be gone. You know, paid, unpaid, what's the duration? Anyone ever see this where you get a doctor's note saying, recommending that the patient's off for a week, and then on Friday you get another one, puts them off for another week, and then 2 weeks, and 4 weeks. Very rarely is there a duration that the doctor says, in approximately 17 days, they will be better, and then they come back. It just doesn't happen that way. They're guessing as much as anybody else is. So how long do we have to do that? Sometimes it might be covered and you think, okay, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and then all of a sudden you look back and it's been 4 months and your employee hasn't come back yet. You haven't designated as any leave, and now you think, how long do we have to do this? Well, sometimes if you've just been doing that informally and not designating it as a leave, they still have that leave entitlement. So you want to get ahead of those. What are the terms of the leave, the duration? What am I entitled to as an employer? Can I get a medical certification? Okay, so that's the puzzle. We start asking these questions and we start eliminating. Is it work-related? Do we have something from the doctor? What does the doctor tell us is the reason? How big are we? How many employees do we have? How long has this employee been here? An employee that's been there 4 hours, a new hire, worked for you for 4 hours, is covered by the Pregnancy Disability Act. An employee that's worked for you for 11 months is not covered by the Family Medical Leave Act, okay, because each of them have their own eligibility requirements. And that's just information gathering. I don't know where it happened, but somewhere in history, the world decided that doctors had authority over employers. Not so. A doctor's note is simply a recommendation to a patient that they remain off work for some period of time, or that they have restrictions, that they don't do something if they want to get well. Okay, we get those and as employers go, oh my gosh, we got to do this and this, and they're out. And no, that's just a piece of information. That's one piece of information. It's a recommendation to a patient. Before I make any decisions, I'm going to go through this analysis. I'm going to collect this information. I can't tell you how many times I've had an employer call me and say, you know, this person's been out for like 7 months now. Can we get rid of them? And I say, well, what are they out for? What are they out on? They're out on disability leave. Well, which one? What are you talking about? Well, their doctor sent a note. Well, that doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know what the terms are. Doctor sent a note, you let them leave? I don't know what the rules are because you didn't go through this analysis. But we do that because we think the doctors have authority, and they don't. Don't tell them that, but they don't. Any questions so far? Anything? Okay. Okay, so once you've gone through the statutory leaves, FMLA, California Family Rights, pregnancy disability, is it an accommodation under the ADA? And we'll get into these in greater detail. Do we have to accommodate it under a statute, or do we have to look at does our policy require that we do something? Do we have a light duty obligation? Does our workers' comp carrier give us a discount if we have a light duty program or a return to work program? Not required by law, but maybe you have a contractual reason to do that. Do you have a contract with Chevron that says, you know, you need X, Y, and Z before someone can return to work? So once you eliminate the statutory requirements and you go through your contractual requirements, and then you look at your handbook and you look at what you've done in the past. Okay? You document. We want to communicate. Once we figure out what it is, we want to document it, communicate it to the employee. And then we have David's rule of the last piece of paper, which means if somebody doesn't come back, if somebody sues you, if someone says you didn't do something to accommodate them, the last piece of paper, the one with the most recent date, has to be from the employer, asking the employee to do something. Because then we can say, in good faith, no, wait a minute. We didn't fail to accommodate you. If you see, on June 12th, we sent you a letter saying, give us a call to talk about reasonable accommodations, and you never responded. Okay, it's a get-out-of-jail-free card. You always want to put the burden back on someone else, and you want to document that you did that. Okay, details. Family Medical Leave Act. It applies to 50 or more employers or all public agencies regardless of government agencies, regardless of how many employees. Two halves to it. Are you a covered employer? Do you have covered employees? Eligible employees. Eligible employees, employees that have been there for a year at least. Employees that have worked, and that's at any time. It's not consecutive. Employees that have worked 1,250 hours in the last 12 months. And employees that work within 75 miles of 50 other employees or 49 other employees. So you do those two halves. The California Family Rights Act, I generally refer to family medical leave as both of those combined. Really the only difference between them, significant difference, is how they treat pregnancy. One covers it, one doesn't. But everything else is pretty much the same. And in most instances, they're going to run concurrently. They're going to run together. And so oftentimes I'll see a note in a file or a communication to an employee that says, you've been granted we've approved your 12 weeks of FMLA leave. Include the other one too. We want to make sure that there's no question your federal and state family medical leave. We want to designate that time. It's the employer's duty to designate that time. There are 3 or 4 reasons, and this goes to your analysis of when someone gives you a note. There are 3 or 4 reasons why an employee might use one of these leaves. Serious medical condition of the employee. Okay, if it's not work-related, employee gets hurt at home, employee gets sick, employee has a chronic condition. Okay, this is a leave of absence for the personal medical condition of that employee if they're eligible. Another major reason would be to care for a designated family member. Family members are defined in the statute. It's not my boyfriend's grandma's ex-boyfriend. No, I need to take a leave to take care of them. They're designated in the statute. It's to care for them under certain conditions. If, in fact, a doctor certifies that that employee is needed in the care of that family member. Okay, so that's what that's for. Third major reason, baby bonding. This is post-birth, first year, or post-adoption. Woman or man can stay home to take care of or to baby bond. And then the ones that have been added in the last couple of years are related to military service, care of a veteran, having to take care of a veteran, or what they call exigencies, emergencies related to being called up to active duty. Employees can use that. Now, that's not really medical, but it falls under the Family Medical Leave Act. So that's why I say when I get a doctor's note or a note from an employee saying I got to ride my Harley across the United States, and they say to visit someone, oh, really? For fun? Oh, well, no. It's my dad, and I need to take care of him. He's going through cancer treatments. Okay, now we know we might be in a family medical leave. Family medical leave provides job protection. It's a right to come back if you've been gone for one of these reasons. That's the whole point of it. Employers oftentimes who haven't dealt with this before give me a lot of pushback saying, well, I can't hold this job for 2 weeks or for 12 weeks. Well, if he or she qualifies, you have to. That's the whole point of it. If there wasn't protected leave status, then a lot of people would get rid of employees who take leaves for these reasons. They don't want to wait 12 weeks. You have to if they meet the requirements. Okay, we talked about the eligibility. And what do they get? I mean, what do these leaves give you under the family medical leaves? Up to 12 weeks of time off. It can be taken straight time. It can be taken intermittently. It's 12 weeks of that employee's regularly scheduled work week. So an employee who works full-time is entitled to more hours than an employee that works an hour a week. An employee who works an hour a week, scheduled an hour a week, is entitled to 12 hours of Family Medical Leave Act leave, protected leave, because that's their normal schedule. They can take it intermittently, chronic conditions, dialysis, ongoing treatment under the care of a physician. Sometimes you need to take an hour or two a week, and they can take that. And you can mark that off. You convert their work schedule to hours, and you start deducting from the hours as they take time off. They're entitled to continue health insurance benefits on the same terms and conditions. And that's another reason why we want to know what law we're dealing with, because we want to know, do we have to keep paying the health insurance? Under the Medical Leave Acts, you have to continue paying under the same terms and conditions. That means if you pay 100% as the employer, you got to keep paying 100% for up to 12 weeks. If you pay 50%, 50%. Question is, well, what happens with the employee's 50%? Well, you got to decide. You have to tell them. You can front it. You can make them bring you a check. You can ask them to pay it in advance. You can make them sign a promissory note. You can do whatever you want to do. If the employee says, well, I don't have the money, I'm not going to pay for it, well, then it lapses for lack of premium payment. Okay, but we need to know that. There are some limited instances in which you do not have to grant continued medical leave, and that's what's called the key employee exception. Very high level, top 10% pay of your payroll. Those few limited people, once they qualify for FMLA, you can demand that they come back to work. If they can't, you can terminate. And really that comes down to, you're going through a merger and your CFO says, I'm real stressed and I need family medical leave. You can probably deny that, but very limited, and I haven't seen it happen that often. Do you have a question? No. Okay. Okay, so what are your rights? We talk about, what employees are entitled to. What are the employer's rights? Medical certification of a serious health condition. If an employee says, my doctor's putting me off work, I want a medical certification. And that doesn't mean doctor writes a note saying they're off. It's by statute, it's defined. You can go on to Google or you can get onto our website if you're a client and you can type in FMLA medical certification, and we spit the form out and it says exactly what the doctor has to put in there. That they're treating them, that it's a condition that's covered by the FMLA, it meets the definition of serious health condition, what's the expected duration, all those things. If you don't get that, and doctors hate filling those out, you don't have to approve the leave until you get it. So if you keep getting back, I put them off work, too bad. That's not a medical certification. I would require that all approved leaves have the proper certification. Not to prevent anyone from taking it, but simply to know what we're dealing with, to define the leave that they're under so that we know what the rules are. If there are rules, let's follow the rules. It's not that hard to go and have the doctor get a medical certification if you are in fact eligible for it. If there's doubt, legitimate doubt as to the truthfulness of the original note, doctor's note, you can get a second opinion with a physician of the employer's choice that the employer has to pay for. Very limited exception, but here's the classic one, I still remember it. I got a call, one of my clients, saying that they had an employee ask for 12 weeks off under FMLA to care for her daughter. Great. Found out more information. Well, the daughter was 28, married, pregnant. There was nothing wrong with her. The mom just wanted to take that time to bond with her daughter. We said, that doesn't qualify under the FMLA. It's not a covered event. The next day, we get a note from the same employee's doctor putting her off work for 12 weeks for an unspecified condition. Okay, coincidence? I don't think so. So we sent her for a second opinion. Okay, those are the situations where you can do that. In fact, I don't think she showed up to the second one. I think she quit. But you can require that employees utilize vacation or PTO while on FMLA. Can run concurrently. And you can require a release at the end of it, of the leave, if you've announced that up front in the communication approving the leave or in your policies. And here's the key. A release is, you can't specify what's in the release. You can ask for, by statute, a release confirming that the employee can perform their essential job duties, and you can require their physician review and sign off on a job description. That's all you can get. If the doctor releases them under those conditions, you have to return them to work. You can't say it has to be a full release, it has to be a full release and then a release from our physician. Under FMLA, if the doctor certifies after reviewing the job duties that they can perform their essential job duties, you cannot interfere with their right to return to work. Okay? And that's important. We want the doctor to review those to make sure that they're actually releasing them. How many times have you seen a release that says an employee can return to work and do their job? They can do all their job. Well, how do you know? How does the doctor know what they do? You call them and ask them, well, you said they can do all their job duties. Do you know what they are? No. Well, if we don't, that's our burden. Let's give them a job description. Make sure you have one that actually has the physical requirements on it. Okay? So you've got to announce it in advance, communicate that, and specify what you want back. Yes?
So you can't have them go a double check for a complete position?
Under the FMLA, no. When we get to the ADA, I'll tell you how you can do it. But technically, it says you cannot interfere with their right to return if they provide you with a certification that meets that requirement. Okay? And where it gets confusing is the FMLA and the California Family Rights Act, they use the term a fitness for duty release, which implies a fitness for duty exam. But what they're talking about is a medical certification releasing them to work. They just use the term incorrectly and it gets confusing. Okay. Ooh, boy, that's small. Group health benefits, you're required to post notice of family leave rights. It's in your posters. If you have a handbook, I'd put it in the handbook. If more than, I think, 15% of your employees primarily speak a different language, you have to have it translated. Seniority continues to accrue. You want to be real careful in drafting your FMLA policies that you state in there while on any type of leave, not just FMLA, you do not continue to accrue vacation, PTO, sick. If it's silent, then because benefits are going to continue on the same terms and conditions, it's arguable the employee continues to accrue vacation while not working. And then obviously you can't retaliate against somebody who takes a leave. What's a serious health condition? You know, this is what we need to know from the doctor without asking any medical questions. We need to know if it's a serious health condition that even qualifies for FMLA. Inpatient care, more than overnight, or is it, I think it's overnight. Yeah, any inpatient care. Someone stays overnight, that absence is covered by the FMLA if they meet all the other requirements. Continuing treatment by or under supervision of a healthcare provider. Continuing treatment. You can get updated medical certifications. Sometimes I have someone, a client will call me and they'll say, well, this person, they've always had Friday afternoon off for the last 5 years. Well, for what? For medical treatment. When was the last time you got a medical certification? Oh, I don't know. That was when Jane was here. You know, I just inherited it. And we find out this person hasn't had medical treatment in 4.5 years. Been taking Friday afternoons off. So for continuing chronic conditions, you can get periodic updated certifications.
Do they define what a healthcare provider is?
Great question. It's pretty broad. I've actually approved one that we got something from a shaman, Native American shaman. You know, it doesn't come up that often. It's one of those things where you have to kind of look at it, and acupuncturists count. Those are specified in there. Yeah, it's pretty broad. I'm waiting for a witch doctor. Witch. Pregnancy under the FMLA, or incapacity due to a chronic serious health condition. Asthma, diabetes. Now, what's tricky about those is that it might not require sort of monitoring or oversight, close oversight by a physician. It doesn't require inpatient care, but it's still a medical condition, still a chronic condition that the person has. And those are the ones where maybe there's no regular doctor involvement, but you want to get a certification every once in a while, just confirming the employee can perform their essential job duties. Okay, and I'm not going to get into all the details of those certifications. That's in the statutes. You can look at that. I just want you to know that that's available. It's not you get one once and the employee can tell you whatever they want for the next 10 years. Okay. For the employee's own absence, you can get a medical certification for everything but baby bonding. Okay, if someone tells you they adopted a child, if you know someone had a baby and they want a baby bond and they're eligible, you have to grant it. You can't get anything from their doctor. Talked about that. You cannot get a second opinion for the family care leave. So if it's to care for somebody else other than the employee, you cannot get a second opinion. I'm not going to go through these. They're in the materials. These are what are on our form. These are the elements of a medical certification for FMLA. Okay? And whether you download the form or type up your own, these are the things that you want to put in it. So what's 12 weeks of time? Talked about it. 12 weeks of the employee's regular work schedule. Changed this January 1st to the regs. Now it's converted to hours. They used to talk about weeks, and now they've codified it that it's hours. You figure out the employee's hours and you multiply it by 1/4 of a year. I believe 1/4? 1/3 of a year. 1/3 of 2,080, and that's how many hours they're entitled to. This is critical. How's the 12 months determined? There are 4 different ways, and by default, if you don't pick one, it's calendar year, which means someone can take 12 weeks at the end of the year and then 12 weeks at the beginning. Most, if not all, of my clients use the rolling calendar looking backward. So at any point somebody asks for medical leave under the FMLA, we just look back 12 months and we see how much they've used. That's the easiest way to do it. Some employers use the rolling forward. The first day you take some, you now have 12, we measure it from there going forward. The problem is every employee then is different. And you have to figure out when was the actual first day. So for ease of operations, I would simply use the rolling calendar looking backwards, but that's your choice. Paid or unpaid? Yes? It does. Not necessarily in your handbook. It has to be stated in however you're communicating your FMLA policy. So if that's a handbook, if you have a separate handout for the FMLA, you have to define the year. If not, it defaults to a calendar year. Okay, paid or unpaid. Virtually all of the leaves, medical and non-medical, are unpaid. The exceptions are, and we're not going to talk about that one because it's brand new, but bone marrow or organ donor leave, which is fairly new. Last couple of years, it's the only required paid leave that I can recall in California history. All the rest are unpaid generally. You can require that an employee uses vacation, accrued PTO. You can make them use sick leave if it's for their own health condition. Where we run into problems is that we continue to pay people sometimes. So then you have a policy of it. Someone's out and then they come back and then they're gone for a little while and they're an exempt employee getting a salary and we continue to pay them. And now we have a practice of paying people when they're gone. Sometimes I have employers tell me, well, we continued to pay him because of his situation at home and he's got 14 kids, but then this person we didn't. Once you start getting into that, then you run into discrimination issues. So you could inadvertently create an informal policy of paying people while they're on leave, but the general rule is they're unpaid. The right to leave is the right to return. Return to what? The question is, they leave, they're in a position, what do we have to bring them back to? Well, it says a comparable position. Well, that's easy. If you got a lot of positions, yeah, we can find something comparable. But then you read the definition of comparable. It's same job duties, same level of authority, same prestige, same pay, basically same shifts, same location. It's the same job. I mean, you really have to put it, yes, you have to hold their job open and they get it back. Now, what happens when you have an employee that goes out on FMLA? It's probably one of three things that happen. They're gone for 12 weeks. What are some of the things that you figure out while they're gone? We can do it without them. You know, it's this big panic, oh, how are we going to do it? And then you don't notice they've been gone and hey, okay, we can do it without them. What else happens? They're doing something wrong. Yeah, we find all this stuff they've been doing poorly. Or we love the temp. We want to keep the temp. She does 10 times more than he did while he was here. Do we have to reinstate that employee at the end of the 12 weeks? Yes. If they're under an FMLA leave, a covered leave, those are not reasons to not reinstate them. Now, what I would tell you is, two of those three, if A, the person isn't doing a very good job, or B, you really don't need them at all, the FMLA wasn't designed to help you figure that out. You need to know that before. If you'd been counseling them all along, you can continue that counseling, but you can't just say, aha, look what we figured out. You're out of here. Okay, that happens all the time. You want to be knowing what people are doing and not doing before they take an FMLA leave. Now, if you find out your controller has been stealing from you, well, that would be an exception. You know, controller's gone, we were able to figure it out. I'm okay with not reinstatement on that one, but pretty much everything else, you can't use it as a gotcha. And if you really like the temp, find something for the temp to do until you can figure out a way to legally replace the other person. there is a major exception to the reinstatement obligation. That is, if the employee would have lost their position anyway, even if they had been there and never taken the leave, they don't have any rights greater than anybody else. So you're planning on closing a small location in Lancaster, and that closing date falls right in the middle of someone's FMLA leave, and you lay everybody off. That person gets laid off too, because they would have been laid off. Now, once I say that, what happens is employers call me the next day after I've told them they have to reinstate, and they go, oh, no, we have a layoff. Really? How many people are you laying off? Him, the one the temp was covering for. It's a layoff. No, that's not a layoff. That's a termination. It has to be legitimate. The employee has to, their 90-day contract expired right in the middle of it. The location was closed. We eliminated the bottom 5% of everyone who was hired most recently. Something objective has to be the basis for it. It's a very limited exception. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about on FMLA leave. To me, the takeaway is the first thing you want to do is go through the analysis of whether or not you're covered, whether or not the employee is eligible. If not, we can take the FMLA and the CFRA out of the equation. Okay? If they are covered, then make sure you get your medical certification, make sure your policy's in order, and make sure that you've requested the proper release when they return from work. That is the best way to manage FMLA leaves. Designate the time, communicate with the employee, tell them how much vacation they have. Take control of the leave rather than letting the FMLA take control of you and just kind of bumping along. Okay? Everything you need to know is in these handouts or on the internet to manage a medical leave from a paper standpoint, and I'd encourage you to do that. Okay, we talked a little bit about the Pregnancy Disability Act. Same thing, I told you no maternity leave, it's disabled by pregnancy. Covered employer, 5 or more part-time or full-time employees, or anybody in the public sector. They're all covered. There's no waiting time, there's no hours of service, there's nothing. I have had employees who've been hired and within a week have become disabled by pregnancy. And people just can't believe that you have to hold the position. You do. It is what it is. And the same rules apply as in the FMLA. You can't do a one-person layoff and whatnot. Disabled by pregnancy is a couple of different things. And I have lots of employees that will come up and say, starting September, I'm going to take my maternity leave. And we're in May. Really? How do you know? Well, I got a C-section scheduled that day. Okay, that's legitimate. Well, I'm figuring I'd like to take a couple months off beforehand. That's maternity leave. We don't have to do that. When a doctor determines one of 2 or 3 things, the employee is disabled by pregnancy and cannot perform her essential job duties. Okay, that's one of the reasons. 2, the employee can't perform, maybe physically can perform the job duties, but can't do it without undue risk to the fetus. The x-ray tech. Okay, physically they can go in and do x-rays, or have access to chemicals, a compounder, someone who's touching things. They can physically do it, but if they do, it could impact the pregnancy. If there's something about the pregnancy that the person can't perform the job duties safely to the people around them, okay? Those are all disabled by pregnancy. Now, an employee cannot come in and say, I can't perform this duty, this duty, this duty, this duty, and this duty, so I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to work full-time. If the employee cannot perform the essential job duties of their position because they are disabled under these definitions, then you can make them take a leave of absence, up to 4 months leave. Okay? Now, if you have a position that is open, that the employee qualifies for, and they don't want to take a leave, you have to temporarily transfer them to that position at whatever pay that position pays. Okay? So if you happen to have a front desk position that they can cover for, great, they can do that. If part-time, if you can accommodate part-time, you have to accommodate part-time. But all this means is you've got to engage with the employee. You have to know what the job duties are. You have to make sure you get the proper medical certification from the physician. Because I don't know the answers to these questions when someone tells, they bring a note from their OB that says they're off work, or they have to be on light duty. That one kills me. I don't know what that means. I don't know what light duty means. If you're a receptionist, as opposed to someone who, frames houses, there's a lot different between those. So we need to engage the employee rather than just react, oh gosh, we got to hold this position for 4 months. You might not have to. It covers morning sickness. We see this a lot. And the error that employers make is they don't designate that time. So the employee misses 3 hours every morning for 8 weeks and then goes out on pregnancy disability leave. And we don't know how to calculate the time because no one designated those 3 hours, those sporadic 3 hours, as pregnancy disability leave. If an employee tells you, I'm pregnant and I'm sick as a dog in the morning, and you can accommodate that, communicate that to them, but say, we're going to designate this against your 4 months of pregnancy disability leave. That's what it's for. And very few of my clients do that, and then they get in a bind later and they say, gosh, she's already been gone 100 hours and we haven't designated it. And then prenatal care appointments. Now the employee has an obligation to schedule these around work hours if possible. Sometimes with doctors you take what you get. If you've got to get in for an appointment and the doctor says it's 10 o'clock on Friday, then that's when they have to go. But you can request that they try to schedule it around work hours. Any questions on that so far? Okay. What are the employee's rights? Up to 4 months off. We talked about that. The accommodation, continued insurance for up to 4 months. That's brand new. Started January 1st. On the same terms and conditions, just like the FMLA. How long are you disabled by pregnancy? General rule is that any time prior to the birth of the child and roughly 6 weeks post-birth is about when the pregnancy disability leave expires. Now on a C-section maybe it's 2 months, sometimes there's complications, but the issue is if someone's entitled to baby bonding, we need to know when is the pregnancy disability done and when does the baby bonding start. And that's just something you got to get an updated certification from the physician. If you've had someone out for a long time, baby was born a couple months ago, you're going to want to have that discussion with them. What's the status of your return? Can we get an updated medical certification? And then you have to reinstate them to the same or similar position, just like the FMLA. It's unpaid unless you pay for other disability leaves. You can't have a policy that says, well, anyone who's on workers' comp, we continue their pay, but someone on pregnancy disability, we don't. It's sort of all or nothing. Okay? One exception for smaller employers, but it's minor. Pregnancy disability leave can be taken all at once. It can be taken in increments. Like I said, generally, morning sickness can be taken on a reduced work schedule. If someone can only work 6 out of the 8 hours every day, that's 2 hours a day of pregnancy disability leave that we want to designate as time taken. You can require the use of sick leave, but not vacation. Can't make them take their vacation on pregnancy. Seniority continues, same employee benefits, and the right to reinstatement. Yes?
What if you just use PTO, like instead of designating sick or vacation?
That's a good question. I've always treated that as sick leave because theoretically it can be all used for sick leave. And at some point there's going to be an opinion letter on that. I just haven't seen one. Okay, so what are you entitled to? We know that someone can't just come up and say, I'm going to be gone on maternity leave. Okay. What can we get? Notice. If someone knows that they're going to be disabled on a certain date, usually because it's a scheduled procedure, they got to give us notice. That never happens. 99% of pregnancy disability leave happens immediately. Something's not right, person calls a doctor, they swing by on their way to work, doctor takes them off work, we're done. Okay, that's how it usually happens. They have to provide the medical certification if requested. If we don't request it, they don't have to give it. And here's a policy I see a lot, and it's illegal. It says, if you need a pregnancy leave, please submit your request in writing to personnel. Verbal notice to the company is sufficient to trigger protections under the Pregnancy Disability Act. Someone calls the receptionist and says, hey, when Bob gets there, can you tell him I'm not going to come in, doctor took me off work. The company is on notice that the person has triggered pregnancy disability. At that point, we get the medical certification and follow through on it, but that is notice. I've seen this one time, and it happened in the last 2 months. An employee is entitled to a guarantee of reinstatement. So if they say, hey, if you've approved my pregnancy leave, I want you to guarantee I'm going to be reinstated. They're entitled to it, and I had an employee ask for it. It's not that common, but just know that that's out there. You have to respond to the leave request within 10 days. And I'm glad that's in there because, like I said, in a lot of these leaves, tail wags the dog. Doctor's note comes in, person goes out, we lose track of them, we don't communicate anything, and a year from now we're wondering what happened to them when they want to come back and we forgot they even existed. You have to acknowledge that their leave has been approved or denied, or if you need more information, within 10 days. If you don't, I would say probably they're still entitled to the protections of the leave, but you can't designate the time. I suspect that that would be the result. So it just extends their right to be gone. And you need to post the notices. These are all in your posters that you get. And if you have a handbook, put the requirements in there. For example, the required use of sick leave. If you don't put it in the policy, it's not required. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to get to something else in a minute. How does this interact with the FMLA and the CFRA? If this is sort of the point when a person is no longer disabled by pregnancy, so they're pregnant or just had the baby on this side, pregnancy disability leave and FMLA, federal FMLA, run concurrently. They run at the same time. So if an employee is out for 4 months, then has a baby, they've burned all their FMLA and all their pregnancy disability, and then they move into baby bonding under the California Family Rights Act. What that means is that someone can take up to 4 months of pregnancy disability followed by 12 weeks of California Family Rights Act. This is where the FMLA and the CFRA split. Because of the pregnancy disability statute, California cut it in two. FMLA just counts it for everything. So you want to make sure that when someone goes out on pregnancy disability, that you designate it as FMLA time also, and then baby bonding later if you're covered by baby bonding. So yes, 4 months plus 12 weeks can be taken for a pregnancy under federal and state law if you're a covered employer. Okay, leave as a reasonable accommodation. This is the most common. So you're going through your analysis. You get the doctor's note, and the doctor says, "I'm putting them off." And you go through and you say, "Oh, we don't have 50 employees," or "This is not a covered employee. They're not eligible." Okay, FMLA, CFRA are out. It's not work-related. Workers' compensation's out. They're not pregnant because they're a guy. I guess there's one I saw on CNN, but for the most part, they're not. So that's out. So you think, okay, we look at our policies. We don't have a personal leave policy. Ha ha, we're home free. Not quite. The Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Employment and Housing Act both require that you reasonably accommodate employees with disabilities or medical conditions to enable them to perform their essential job duties. Okay? What does that mean? Are they entitled to a leave? Maybe. It depends. They're entitled to a reasonable accommodation. A short-term unpaid leave has been deemed a reasonable accommodation lots of times. It's one of the most common reasonable accommodations. Someone's not entitled to any sort of statutory leave, but they need some time off for a medical condition, and the ADA covers 15 employees or more, and the Fair Employment Housing Act covers 5 or more, so it covers basically everybody. A short-term leave of absence is reasonable. Okay? That's the broad rule. That's what we run into all the time. In fact, Myrna, you could teach this class for me. It is not independent of any of the other leaves. It exists all the time. And I'll give you an example. Someone takes 12 weeks of FMLA for knee surgery. At the end of the 12 weeks, you're anticipating them showing up and getting back to work, and they fax you a doctor's note putting them off for 2 more weeks. What do you do? What do you have to do?
Can you accommodate them?
Can we accommodate them? Now, what you might say is, 12 weeks under the FMLA, they've used 12 weeks, we're done. Nothing in the FMLA says that they get more than 12 weeks. I can guarantee you that. I've read every word of that. It's about 8,000 words. Nothing requires more than 12 weeks. Problem is, once they're finished with the FMLA and they still can't return to work, they're not under the FMLA anymore. They're now disabled. Anyone who can't return to work after 12 weeks because of medical condition, by definition, has a disability. So they're under the ADA and Fair Employment and Housing Act. It's just a different statute. Yes, FMLA is done. Now we're into another statute. It was just on hold while they were out on their protected leave. Going back to your question earlier about the return to work certification, and I said under the FMLA, you can't send them to your doctor at the end of it. I was being sort of lawyer speak. Under the FMLA, I'm correct. You can't do that. Now, if you reinstate someone and immediately determine that they can't perform the essential job duties, it appears they can't perform the essential job duties, you get a doctor's note that gives them some restrictions, they need additional time off. We're not under the FMLA anymore. Now we're under the ADA, which does allow a fitness for duty exam when they return to work. So if an employee goes out, at 12 weeks they can't return, you're done with FMLA, you accommodate them under the ADA, you can now do a fitness for duty if it's job related. Okay? So that's the little catch.
6 weeks.
What's
So
that?
if the return is 6 weeks during FMLA, I mean, that'll still apply.
Yes. So they only take 6 weeks of FMLA and now they come back, correct? And they get a certification. The doctor says, I looked at their job duties and they can return to work and perform their song. Yes, you have to return them to work. Now, and I always get this from safety people. Well, I don't trust their doctor. Well, that's their doctor. They've examined them more than you have. I'm not putting someone out there who can't perform the job, and this guy's limping. Okay, under the FMLA we can't do it, but guess what? As a safety manager, I've got a guy who's limping who has to climb ladders. What do? Send him for a fitness for duty. So you just have to understand the rules so you don't get yourself in trouble. One thing I can tell you, and people are so afraid of the ADA and the Fair Employment and Housing Act, and when it first came out, I was terrified of it too. I spent weeks reading it. It was in 1993, I think. We're afraid of it because you think you have to have people doing jobs that they can't do. Okay? Yes?
Bringing up the fitness for duty, there's also a fear of doing fitness for duties quite a bit too, county council and so
Fear of doing them.
I can't tell you exactly why.
I can't either. Yeah,
There are a lot of people that we can do fitness for duties on, and they recommend it.
the fear is based probably on, well, if it's county council, I mean, they have some legal reason for not doing it, and maybe it's union contract or something. But I would say it's not understanding when you can use it and not use it. Okay? What I can tell you, and I'll give you an example. The ADA is so simple, and it is pages and pages and pages. It's a very simple statute. It requires that you talk to your employees. It requires that you sit down and communicate about what can enable them to perform essential job duties. Okay? I've used this example before, so if you've heard it, don't yell out the answers. That's not fair. Airline. I'm an airline company. I've got a pilot. Comes in, I'm the HR person. Pilot says, I got in an accident, head went through the window, I'm blind. I want to be accommodated under the ADA. Do we have to accommodate him? I see a no. What would you want to know?
What accommodation do you need?
How long? How long are you going to be blind? The employee says 4 weeks, and they don't qualify for FMLA. Well, so in 4 weeks, you'll have your sight back. Yeah, I've got some swelling back here, and the doctor says it should be fine. Great. Yeah, I can accommodate. I'm United Airlines. I can accommodate 4 weeks. At the end of it, I'm going to send you for fitness for duty to make sure you can see. But sure, they're entitled to it. Next day, pilot comes in. Same thing. Different pilot. Accident. Head went through the window. I'm blind. I want to be accommodated under the ADA. Do we have to accommodate him? I don't know. Same question. How long are you going to be blind? Forever. I'm going to be blind forever. Well, we've now talked about their condition and what accommodations will enable them to perform their essential job duties. None. And they say, well, I want 6 weeks off or 12 weeks off or 6 months off. Well, if that 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months is not likely to result in them seeing again, then it's not a reasonable accommodation. The ADA does not require that you put someone on light duty. It requires that you make accommodations that enable them to perform their essential job duties. So what are the essential job duties? I don't know. You need to tell me when you call. You need to have a job description that explains it. I get a lifting requirement all the time. Well, this person has to be out because we have a 50-pound lifting requirement, and this says they can only lift 30. How often do they lift 50 pounds? I don't know, once a year. Is that an essential job duty? I don't know. What would you want to know? That would make it essential. What are they lifting? Oh, they're moving a file box from one side of the accounting to the other. Forget it, we can get someone else. They're a fireman, they're carrying a body out of a burning building. It might be once a year, but to that one person, that's pretty important. It's pretty essential. So that's the analysis we have to do. So the ADA is never going to require that someone can't perform the essential job duties. Not everything is an essential job duty, and leave isn't always the only accommodation. If an employee comes in and says, oh, hey, I can't meet the lifting requirement, I need 6 months off, and I'm going to go apply for state disability. And you say, forget it. I'll waive the lifting requirement. I can accommodate that. And the employee says, no, I'd rather stay home for 6 months. Too bad. If waiving that lifting requirement enables them to perform their essential job duties, then I, as the employer, get to pick the accommodation, as long as it's effective. Okay, so we don't have to default to a leave. Is there some other way we can deal with it? So practical application of that, you keep getting these doctor's notes for someone that's not covered by the FMLA. And it keeps putting them out, putting them out, putting them out. At some point, that's not a short-term leave of absence that's reasonably likely to result in them returning to work. It's an open-ended leave. Open-ended leaves are not reasonable under the ADA. So what we want to say to them is, what? Myrna? What do we want to tell them?
What can you do to get you back to work?
Yeah. What can we do how long are you going to be gone? Or, you know, we've accommodated 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. We're willing to grant this next 30-day extension. However, after that, we can't accommodate additional leave. It's not reasonable anymore. At some point, we can't cover for your job duties. Now, we'll discuss anything else that'll get you back to work, but just bringing me a doctor's note isn't going to work anymore. You need to communicate that to them. Because what happens is if you don't, and you let them go, you get the Fair Employment and Housing complaint, and it always says, I was disabled, I had a doctor's note, and they failed to accommodate me. What I'd like to go back to the Department of Fair Employment and Housing with is, no, that's not true. We accommodated them for this period, they extended it. We accommodated it, they extended it. We accommodated, they extended it. Finally, after 5 months, we said, this is it. We'll talk about anything else, but you have to give us something that enables you to return to work. If not, it's an open-ended leave. And then we win in that case. But what happens is we just lose track of these people. We keep getting doctor's notes, and then we realize we don't need them anymore, and then they're floating around out there, and then someone comes along and says, why is this person still in the books? And I get the call, can we fire them? What are they out on? What do they say? Disability leave. And I say, there is no such thing. Now, they might be out as a reasonable accommodation under the ADA or FEHA, but they're not out on disability. Disability is an income replacement statute. Okay? So, tail wagging the dog. When you get those situations where people keep giving doctor's notes, take control of the situation. If they've exhausted all their leaves and you're accommodating it, take credit for that. We are willing to accommodate it for X number of days more. However, we need to talk about something that will get you back to work. That's your get out of jail free card under the ADA. And that's really all you need to know about the ADA. Any questions on that? Okay. So then you say, all right, well, what's reasonable? What do we have to accommodate? You said we got to talk to them. Now we're talking what makes something reasonable. You can't go look in a book and it has, you know, if this, then it's reasonable. If this, not. It can be different for different people. Some of the factors we look at, short duration. You know, can we accommodate that lifting requirement for a short period of time by covering? Yeah, we can, but at some point operationally we can't have one person who can't do that job. Okay, so short duration. Predictability of attendance. You'd be amazed how many employees want to be accommodated because they get stressed out at work and I need to be able to kind of come and go as I please. Don't we all? You can't do that. That's not reasonable. Unpredictable attendance for a short period of time is okay. Morning sickness is a classic example. It's unpredictable. But hey, you know, sometimes I wake up and I'm just feeling blue. All right, that happens. But if it's so random that there's no pattern to it, then it's not reasonable, which means we don't have to accommodate it. If there isn't a reasonable accommodation that will enable someone to perform their essential job duties, they're not protected anymore under the ADA. You don't have to do anything. You can lay them off. Will they be qualified to work when they return? Is it likely that this accommodation will at some point enable them to perform their essential job duties? Going back to my knee example, well, we know arthroscopic knees take about 14 weeks to get back to any sort of mobility. Okay, well, the FMLA is 12. I know with some degree of certainty that absent complications, an additional 2 weeks of unpaid leave will probably result in someone with minor knee surgery being able to return to work. Great. That's a reasonability factor. I need to look at that. Now let me ask you this. I'll give you two examples. Employee works in a farming operation and they stamp labels on boxes on a line, conveyor belt. And there's about 100 people all standing in a row and they put these boxes together. They're all interchangeable. One can do labels, one can do this, they can all switch. Employee brings you a doctor's note saying due to some medical condition they need 6 months off. Is that reasonable? I see a no. I don't know. Is it likely for them to return to work? Is it really operationally going to hurt me? Okay, during the break, I had a quick discussion, and I want to cover something that isn't in the materials, but I want to touch on it because it comes into play so often, and that's workers' comp. And workers' comp's its own world. You know, it has all its rules. We could spend days on that. The problem is because the ADA and FMLA and whatnot don't care about workers' comp, they interact with it, they ignore it, they apply when it's there too, and sometimes you get that pushback because you're getting workers' comp rules and you're trying to apply the ADA rules. I just want to kind of give you some pointers on how to deal with that. Designate workers' comp time as FMLA. Okay? If someone is out on a workers' comp leave, if it meets the requirements and they're an eligible employee and you're a covered employer, designate that time as FMLA and burn that FMLA time, and the California Family Rights Act. You can do that. And why would we do that? Because I want to eliminate that. I want to take that off the table. I want it exhausted. Then it's one less thing I need to worry about. Then you have sort of mixed emotions. From an ADA perspective, you want someone performing their essential job duties. From a workers' comp standpoint, sometimes you just want to put them on light duty to get them back to work, brushing their teeth, taking a shower, getting dressed, coming into work. So hopefully they get better. And those are competing interests. What I would say is this: while somebody is within the workers' comp system, don't worry too much about the ADA. Figure out what is your strategy as an employer for employees who are on a workers' comp leave before they're permanent and stationary. I would suggest a strategy would be keep them accountable, stay on top of the claims adjuster to make sure they're going to their doctor's appointment, keep those files moving, and if you have some light duty positions that will get them to come back to work, have them sort nails, anything. Get them coming back in. That's a good strategy with workers' comp, is to get them coming to work and not sitting in front of the television watching commercials from lawyers and getting a check every 2 weeks. Okay? So that's how I would handle that. Now, once somebody is permanent and stationary, meaning they're not getting any better or any worse, you get your finger cut off. Okay? It heals. You still don't have a finger. You're, I guess, disabled because you got 9 fingers, but you're done with the workers' comp system because you're healed. Okay? Now, if that person is permanently disabled because of that injury, we're done with workers' comp and now we're back under the ADA. Can they perform the essential functions of their job with that disability? Okay, so we're out of workers' comp, jump back into ADA and do that analysis. Well, if they have 9 fingers and they're a 10-key operator, I would say, I don't know. We'll have to look at it. If they're blind and they're a pilot, no, we can't accommodate that. If they have some limitations, but they can do the job, that's how you analyze that. Okay, so burn the FMLA, burn the CFRA, deal with your workers' comp within workers' comp, and then when they're permanent and stationary, jump back into the ADA and accommodate them. And what's nice about having gotten rid of the CFRA and the FMLA on the front end is that at the end of their workers' comp, they don't still have that there hanging over your head, where now I want 12 weeks off under the FMLA, at which point they're also going to go apply for state disability and extend the party. So that's how I would manage those two together. Now, you can't have a policy that only offers light duty to work-related injuries or not work-related injuries. It has to apply across the board. So what I would do is have a certain number of designated light duty positions, whether it's ADA, whether it's workers' comp, whatever. We have 5 light duty positions that require no skill other than you brushing your teeth, putting your clothes on, and coming into the office. Okay? And use those short term. Because what we don't want to do, here's what you don't want to do with workers' comp. You've got an employee that's on light duty within workers' comp. And so we keep them in their same job because we want to get them back to work, but we take away some of the essential job duties. Okay, now at the end of the workers' comp, they're permanently disabled, and they say, well, I want to come back to work on light duty. And we say, well, no, we can't accommodate that. Well, guess what? You've been doing it for a year. We can do that. So, if you're going to do light duty, do it in a different designated position. Never take away the essential job duties of a position to get someone back to work, because then it demonstrates that you can accommodate that. And then you're going to be stuck with a light duty position forever when they come back from workers' comp. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Pseudo leaves. Employee comes in and says, I'm going to take 6 weeks of paid family leave. Really? We have 8 employees. You're not covered by the FMLA or the CFRA, and you're not disabled because you want to take care of somebody else. You're not covered. Oh, I've been on the internet. And it says, under the paid family leave, I'm entitled to 6 weeks to take care of my grandmother. Boy, that sounds really logical, and I would agree. Unfortunately, it was named incorrectly. Paid family leave is an insurance benefit, and the best way to describe it is this. If you get hurt at work, you get temporary disability under the workers' comp statutes. If you get hurt snowboarding and you can't work, you can apply for state disability. If you exercise your rights under the FMLA to care for a family member, you can't get either of those. There's no income replacement. Government decided that people weren't utilizing the Family Medical Leave Act leaves enough, and they did some surveying and found out, well, it's because it's unpaid. So they created the Paid Family Leave Act. If an employee is out of work to care for a family member for some other legitimate reason, they can apply to the EDD for income replacement for 6 weeks. So what I mean by that is if an employee comes in and says, hey, can I take 6 weeks off to take care of my grandmother? And you say, sure, that's fine. You don't have to, but yeah, I'm a good guy, go ahead. Employee can go down, they can say, I'm taking care of my grandmother, here's certification, they can get 6 weeks of pay for that. Okay? Now, another employee comes in and says, I want to take 6 weeks off to take care of my grandmother. They're not covered by FMLA or CFRA, they're not disabled, it's not workers' comp, and I can't accommodate that. I'm going to say no. You can go do it and you can apply, and if they give you money, great, but you don't have any job protections. I don't have to reinstate you at the end of it. And that's very confusing. So if someone is gone, has some other right to be gone, they can apply for benefits. It doesn't create a right to be gone. Does that make sense? Now, would you agree that that is the stupidest named act ever? Paid family and leave, and it has nothing to do with the employer. Okay? Where it can be used legitimately, someone's taking baby bonding under the FMLA. Well, they can't get state disability and they can't get workers' comp. They can apply for 6 weeks of paid family leave. Caring for a family member, it's another example. Some of my employers have a 30 or 60-day personal leave for things that don't fall under something else. Great. If they have that and someone utilizes it to take care of a family member, they apply to the EDD. So when an employee comes to you and says, I want my 6 weeks of leave, all you need to figure out is, under all these other things we've talked about, do they have a right to be gone? If not, you tell them that and say, go talk to the EDD. But we're not going to guarantee reinstatement at the end of that. Okay? And I've repeated that in the slides. Okay. The other one is simply the state disability. That doctor's note, where we say, oh, they're out on disability, that doctor's note really has no authority over the employer. The employee can take that note that says they're disabled, putting them out, can go to the EDD and apply for state disability benefits. That's where that out on disability came from. A lot of people think that because they are getting state disability benefits, that there's some sort of job protection, and that's not the case. The two are totally separate. They have to be, if someone has job guarantees, it's under something different than just because they're getting state disability. Here's the other sort of quirk with the disability. An employee can be temporarily, totally disabled for purposes of state disability, for getting benefits, but able to perform their essential job duties. So just because someone's getting state disability, don't use that in your analysis of reasonable accommodations. I mean, it's something you might want to ask about, but that in and of itself doesn't determine whether or not someone can return to work. They are totally unrelated. Here's what so we've talked about the statutory protections, and I want to talk about just some discretionary things. Sick leave and paid time off, vacation. Technically, those can be used for medical leaves. What are the rules? I don't know. Look in your handbook. You invented it. You make the rules. If you're going to have a policy, make sure it's clear. If you have an extended illness bank, I see those oftentimes. And some will say, well, what if they do this or that? What if they have a second job? Do we still have to pay a... I don't know. Extended illness banks don't exist in the law. You created it, you make the rules. If you want medical certification confirming that mirrors the FMLA, then put that in there. Talked about the personal leave of absence. I guess if you are going to have one, just make sure you follow your own rules, you don't discriminate. And if you are going to discriminate, make sure it's based on a non-protected reason. Give you an example of that. Pregnancy disability. Employer called me about 5 years ago. He said he had an employee going out on pregnancy disability. He wanted to continue paying her while she was out. 28-year-old Caucasian. He said, can I do that? Sure. You can continue to pay someone if you want to. Within a day or two, I want to say it was the next day, he calls again, has another employee, 27-year-old Hispanic, pregnancy disability. He doesn't want to pay her for her pregnancy disability leave. I told him that's fine. Does that surprise you? No? Yeah, it surprised me a little bit. It surprised me as the words came out of my mouth. It had nothing to do with her age or her ethnicity. The first one was his daughter. So you can discriminate on these. Each case, look at it by itself. No one's ever going to sue you successfully because you chose to give extra benefits to your kin, to the bearer of your future grandchild. So, but we want to make sure that there is a legitimate reason if we create these policies and we treat people differently, why we're doing it, and that it's not a discriminatory reason. The other thing you want to be concerned with is on these sick leaves, vacation leaves, do we want to designate as FMLA? How many people here have ever had a sick leave policy or worked with one, been entitled to one? Okay. How many have ever designated when someone takes 3 weeks of sick leave, designated that time as FMLA time if it was covered? Nobody does, because we think, well, this is sick leave, that's FMLA. If someone can't work for 3 weeks because they can't perform their essential job duties, that's FMLA. Designate the time. Because what happens is I get a call later saying, this person's been out on this leave and this, and now they want their FMLA. Do we have to give it to them? I say, well, I don't know. On all those other times they were out, did you designate it as leave? Well, no, that was sick time. No, they run concurrently, but only if you do that. So that's part of that analysis. What is someone covered by? And then the last one, and then I'm going to do a sort of a group case study, rehab programs. We've seen a lot of this. Do we have to accommodate someone who is suffering from a drug or alcohol addiction? And I would say if you looked in the labor code and you have 25 or more employees, it says employers must reasonably accommodate someone who voluntarily enters a rehabilitation program to the extent that it doesn't disrupt operations or something. Well, that sounds like guy comes in, truck driver, tests dirty, says, I want to assert my right under the labor code for to voluntarily enter a rehab program? I don't think so. You didn't voluntarily agree. I caught you. Okay? That's one where I say, go ahead, but it has nothing to do with me. Good for you. Good luck with that. Okay? Someone voluntarily means, this isn't under ADA or anything. ADA does not cover current drug or alcohol abuse. You catch someone dirty or someone comes to you and says, I'm addicted. They are not protected under the ADA or the Fair Employment and Housing Act. To me, it's simple. If someone voluntarily comes forward prior to disciplinary action and says, can you help me? My answer is always, yes. Here's how I'm going to help you. You're going to demonstrate to me that you've enrolled in an in-house program. Step one. If you make it through that, then you're going to successfully complete that. And then you have to do 12 weeks of follow-up, and then we'll bring you back on a last chance agreement. We're going to randomly test you for 6 months. If you can make it through all of that, I'm accommodating you and I'll let you drive that forklift. That is totally fine. On the other hand, and I got this one just a couple days ago, employees been stealing from a doctor, been stealing pharmaceuticals, addicted to Vicodin. We caught her. She wants rehab. No. I'm not accommodating you. I'm terminating you for stealing. So that to me is the issue. One is an accommodation. One is strictly disciplinary. You can do whatever you want to, but know that you're not dealing generally with the ADA or FEHA for active drug abuse. Okay? Now, if someone has some repercussions from drug abuse from 2 or 3 years ago, then they might fall under the ADA. Any questions on that one? Okay. All right. This is how it always comes in. I'm going to give you a case scenario, and we're just going to kind of work through it analytically. Employee walks in to the office, medical office, glass-fronted windows, where people sit and type and take copays and stuff. Bunch of people in the lobby. Employee comes in, do the key code, sits down, takes off her sweater, takes off her hat, scarf, logs onto her computer, reaches in her desk, takes out her scissors and cuts her wrists. Right there in front of everybody. And this occurred on a Thursday. Client calls me on Friday at 4:30 and tells me that this just happened and the employee wants to come back to work tomorrow morning. Can we fire her? That's what got dumped in my lap at 4:30 on a Friday. My first response was, why are you calling me today? Why didn't you call me yesterday? So that's the first one. Now, you're the HR person. You got that question from one of your supervisors. What are we going to do? What are we going to do first based on what I've been talking about? What's that?
Fitness for duty.
I'm going to look at our employee file and see if there's anything in the past.
Okay.
Was there any disciplinary, what's really going on? Has anybody noticed anything? Is this, just out of the blue, she just did it and there's nothing there? She's been an exemplary employee up till now. What's going on?
Okay. Anybody else? Now, what? No, you can't call me. I'm not available. What did I say when this comes in? What is the process, regardless of the facts, what's the process that we're going to go through when this shows up on our desk? Gosh, I must be a terrible teacher. Is it work-related? What is she covered by first? Before we get to the firing, they're asking, can we fire her? My question to me is, can we fire her? I don't know. to answer that question, I need to know, is she protected under anything that would prevent us from firing her? Okay, so we've gone through these statutes. Is it work-related?
She's going to say yes.
And why would she do that?
She's going to say the stress of work caused her to get up and cut her wrist, which unfortunately we have similar.
Sure, she certainly could. So when someone says, in fact, that was the first question I asked the employer who called me. Is it work-related? I could hear the pause while they're thinking, we pay you? Of course it's not work-related. And but she did it herself. It's not one of her job duties. And I said, I'm not talking about the what. I'm talking about the why. Well, how would I know? I don't know. Pull her file. What's going on? Do we have a history? Talk to the supervisor. Get the whole picture. What am I dealing with? Oh, this is the person who's been going through a divorce and her husband came in last week and slashed her tires in our parking lot and we got a threatening letter and blah. Okay. I want the context of the situation. What am I dealing with? Somebody has spoken to that employee at work in the last week and has something of value to tell me. Okay? There's something about that employee. Collect the information. Okay? Is it work-related? I don't know. So let's put that aside. If it is, I probably can't terminate her. So that's one caution flag. How many employees does the employer have? 50. They had more than 50. Okay. Then I could hear the person catching on, the HR person. Oh, they're FMLA. Well, I don't know yet. What do I want to know? What's that? How long has she been there? How many hours has she worked? Is she a covered employee? We're a covered employer. Is she an eligible employee? I don't know. Okay, well, you called me. I don't know either. Go get that information. Okay, so let's put that one aside. I don't know if she's covered under the FMLA. Is she pregnant? No, she's not pregnant. Okay, great, fine. We'll put that one off to the side. If she's not covered by the FMLA, do we have to, is this a situation we might have to reasonably accommodate? Is she disabled under the ADA or Fair Employment and Housing Act? She's not right. I mean, I don't know what always is a disability, but I'd say that someone who does that, there's something going on upstairs that I wouldn't call normal. So yeah, we might have, and not the what, it's the why. It's what drove them to do that. Now, here's an exception, and then actually I'll get to that now. So we're working through this and the employer says to me, okay, fine, okay, maybe it's workers' comp, maybe it's FMLA, I don't know, maybe it's an ADA, but I don't want her back because I think she's a threat to everybody around her. Why? She cut her wrists. That doesn't tell me anything. Now, if she'd cut somebody else's, I'd agree with you. But just because she used a pair of scissors doesn't make her a risk and trump everything else. Now, I don't care what she does at home. Now, if they said, well, right before she did it, she was waving the scissors around. Okay, now it's a safety issue. Do I have significant safety issues that trump my red flags or warning signals on the protected activity? Because I'll take that case on any day. The person was attacking us with scissors, and yes, she's probably covered by the ADA, but Your Honor, I don't care. I'm not bringing her back. She chased us with scissors. Okay, that will trump the ADA. But just because she cut herself, I would say that's probably not enough. Then they come back and they say, well, how do you know what she's capable of? I don't. And you don't either. So what do we do? What are we entitled to as employers under all these acts? Medical certification, some information. We need information. I'm not qualified to tell you if she can perform her essential job duties, and neither is the employer. Her work might have been perfect. A little disruptive in the front, but, you know, customer service issues, whatever. I need to know that. So we've gone from can we fire her to I'll tell you that answer after you tell me if it's work-related, after you tell me if she's covered by the FMLA, after you figure out if there's a reasonable accommodation, after you prove to me she's a safety risk, or after you get some sort of medical certification saying she can't perform. Okay, I can't answer those questions without collecting that information. And you know what the response is from the employer? It's now 5 to 5. Well, we're closing in 5 minutes and she's coming in at 8 tomorrow. That's what all this panic's about. How do we deal with that? Yeah. Tell her not to come in at 8 tomorrow. I don't have time to figure this out between now and tomorrow. But it happened and she's on the schedule. Cross her off the schedule. Call her up and tell her, in light of the activities of yesterday afternoon, I'm going to put you on paid administrative leave till we can kind of get our arms around this. We need to get more information. You can do that as an employer. We make mistakes based on time crunches and reacting. Okay, so this is a situation we don't want to react. I get all of my fun stuff after 2 o'clock on Friday. It always happens. And 15 years ago, I'd freak out and I'd stay up all night. And I said, forget it. Put them on leave. We'll deal with this on Monday. Doesn't hurt. It's okay. And I prefer paid leave because then there's no punitive aspect to it. So I just don't want her there tomorrow. Okay, so then what do we do next? Well, on Monday, we still have all these questions. We figure out she actually isn't eligible for FMLA. I'm still of the mind that she's probably got some sort of disability, mental disability, or certainly something putting pressure on her. I don't know if she's a safety risk, and we're sort of at the end of what we can figure out on our own. So, employer says, well, what do we do now? Are you telling me I have to? No, I'm not telling you anything. What I'm saying is we need more information. How do we get that information? A doctor. I want someone to poke around and give me that information. I say call her up, schedule a fitness for duty with a mental health care professional. Can we do that? Sure. Sure. It's part of the accommodation, the interactive process, reasonable accommodation. I will consider accommodations. I am not qualified to determine if you can perform the essential job duties without some assistance from a medical provider. We'll pay for it, but you're going to go. Okay? That's not punitive. It makes sense. It covers your safety responsibilities to your other employees. It gets you the information you need to know if you need to reasonably accommodate her. That's what we need. We need information. So what we did is we scheduled her for that appointment, kept her on paid administrative leave, and on Wednesday she resigned and said she just was having too many personal issues, needed to take care of herself, and thanked us for everything we had done. What's that? Well, it did. And what happened is this. On Friday at 4:30, the employer didn't want her in the office the next morning at 8. That was their objective. Okay? She wasn't there at 8. They didn't have to worry about her stabbing somebody else. We didn't have to change her job duties. We didn't have to figure out if she was able to perform her essential job duties. And she didn't sue. She left on a good note. That's the way this process, to me, that's how this process is supposed to work. What are we covered by? What do we have to do? And what are we entitled to? And if you just work through it that way, from A to Z as a puzzle, it generally resolves itself. And what I mean by that is, here to me is, out of all the stuff we're talking about, the result that I want when we get this doctor's note is this. I either want somebody soon to come back to work and perform their essential job duties, or I want them gone and I don't want to get sued. That's all I want. They're either working or they're gone, and that's how you get there. is by working through this process. You offer them the things that they're entitled to, the things they sue you for if you don't do it, and you demand of them the things they're required to do. They're required to communicate, they're required to get you the information that you need, they're required to engage in the interactive process, and they are required to perform their essential job duties. And this process, time-tested, I've used it a million times, it works, but you got to be committed to it. You can't let time constraints get in your way. You can't let frontline supervisors that come up and say, well, yeah, but this is a bad person anyway. They've been horrible. You know, then they're out on leave. I want them gone. Well, if they're so horrible, go pull their file and let's terminate them for discipline. Oh, and by the way, since you didn't document any of that, I'm putting you on a performance plan because now I'm stuck with this person because you didn't do it. Okay? Those are the pressures that we have in making these decisions. Owners, managers, safety people, I want them out. Okay? Work through the process, get them back to work, get them gone, don't get sued. Okay? Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it very much. Thank you to those streaming, and we'll see you next time.